On March 20th, 1976, Catherine Carpenter entered the home of a local woman named Joann Denton, who proclaimed herself to be the witch of the small rural town of Morganton, North Carolina. Catherine's father, Fred, had convinced her to visit the woman to try and get into contact with her dead husband, Buddy Carpenter, who had passed away the previous October. During this seance, the witch claimed to have received a vision and foretold that Catherine's mother, Dorothy Ramsey, would die in a car wreck on April 10th. 21 days later, on April 10th, Dorothy Ramsey would indeed die, and Joann Denton would become the first woman in 284 years to be arrested and publicly tried in the United States for witchcraft. Joann Denton was probably born on January 25th, 1934. She would often give conflicting testimonies about her age to those who asked, but that date seems the most consistent. She would say about her earliest years, "I guess I've always known I was a witch. My mother said strange things began happening when I was only 3 days old." She practiced witchcraft. "I was raised in a haunted house. Our whole family has it. My twin brother Jody and sister June have it to some degree. I had my first psychic experience when I was 6 years old. Our house was haunted, and I remember hearing people walking around in the house, but I didn't see anyone there. My mom still hears things in that house." At another point in time, she would describe her earliest years as follows. "Of course, I grew up in a haunted house. We heard voices, creatures moving about. I grew up with witches. My mother and father were witches. I remember walking out into the woods with my mother, searching for a small flower with little bitty leaves. She used it in her brews for health. Yes, all my ancestors were witches. I'll never forget my childhood, a very unhappy time. My mother made us dress differently. I always had to wear black stockings. The children laughed at us. We were the crazy old things who lived down the road. The witch young'uns, they called us. When we were little, the other children threw rocks at us, pushed us in mud holes, called us names, spat on us. We would not fight back. Grown-ups were against us too. I remember well how it was in high school. I would walk up and sit down beside some girls in the lunchroom, or on the bleachers, and they would scream and just up and run away. I didn't date anybody. I was totally shunned. As a result of my psychic experiences, I had few friends. Through high school, I only had one girl I could relate to." Although she had not clarified this in much detail, she says that from a young age, she has held two souls within her body. There was the Joanne that most saw and interacted with, but there was also a second identity named Jolene, who could take control of the body and was capable of much darker power and malice. She would say, "Jolene is my spirit friend. Some people see her as me. I accept her because she reminds me of another life and another place, but I'm not sure where. This house is of two worlds." According to her, everyone has these mental powers. It's just that I've learned to control them, and most people haven't. After high school, she says that her life became quite boring, at least to her. "It's not interesting at all. My first work was at Skyland Textiles. I have done many things to earn a living. I was once a go-go dancer, a topless waitress. I managed a wrestling team, the Grey Shadows. I think I invented streaking. I was streaking when I was 11 years old, as soon as I had something interesting to show. My mother didn't know it though. Have you seen a streaking witch? I've been a waitress, secretary, teacher, lots of things. I'm an ordained minister too. Did you know that?" Joann Denton is the self-proclaimed witch of Morganton in Burke County, North Carolina. This has always been a significant fact to me because I too am from Morganton, North Carolina. And I have grown up my entire life hearing stories about Joann Denton, about what happened in 1976 and the events that followed. She has lived within 10 minutes of me for most of my life. I have driven past her home, Grey Shadows, so many times that seeing it is a regular occurrence. It was sold to new owners many years ago now. I don't know who lives there anymore. And looking at it today from the outside, you would never know the many things that happened here all those years ago. And since this place, Morganton, is my home, please, if you will allow me to paint you an image to set the stage. Picture in your mind the idealized small American town. Population today 17,000. Then place it in a stagnating puddle of country rot that has been in the sweltering heat since the 1950s. When entering and leaving the town by interstate, you are greeted on both ends by massive Confederate flags. I have personally heard jokes many times at the town barbershop, sayings, from customers and people cutting hair alike saying many things. One of which I heard once in there is that some of them hope the flags are successful in scaring and keeping certain types of people from moving into Morganton that don't fit the town image. That is the culture of that shop. Fox News on all the televisions. A portrait of John Wayne hung prominently on the wall, among with other far-right figures. It is generally seen as a cultural hangout in the center of town, and can thus be seen as a part of the culture of Morganton at large. Everyone continues to have their hair cut there, despite the fact that they may or may not believe in the things that are openly joked about and discussed on a daily basis. I myself did for years, simply because they give good, cheap $10 haircuts. It's just that kind of town, where if you don't believe in something that someone is saying or doing, instead of standing against it, you look the other way and pretend it just doesn't exist. Diagonally across from his barbershop, you will find that there is a pedestaled statue of a Confederate soldier on the town square that was protected in recent protests by men with guns. Out of curiosity, I brought a compass one day down here with me, and he faces directly south with his back to the north. In the bathroom of the now closed bowling alley, which has since been repurposed into a shooting range, resting on the sink I once found a stack of business cards, advertising memberships to the KKK. The flags actually have been confirmed to be put up on land by the interstate purchased by the Klan, to symbolically show their presence in the area. Although when asked, many would tell you that they are not here. But I know people who have seen them at night in person. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, on November the 10th, 2003, the Cleveland Knights held a full rally in Burke County. And in 2006, a man named Grady Allen Carswell was arrested in Morganton for burning a cross in front of a couple's home. This is something that you can hardly find any information about today, but sometime in the late 60s, in broad daylight under the protection of the police, the Klan actually had a full-on march through the Morganton town square. And for some reason, I just feel like some of them never really went away. I'd tell you more information about this if I could, but it has largely been covered up and erased from history. People do not openly talk about it, but it did happen. This photograph taken on that day is one of the only things I could find from the parade as physical evidence of it existing. In fact, I found the moderator's page for the Morganton Wikipedia entry, where they specifically talk about making an effort to erase this information from articles, to not scare away people who were thinking of moving or visiting here, saying, "The point has come up before that this page could be used to attract new residents to Morganton, and that unhappy thoughts might drive them away." Every time I've told someone the depth of honesty that's going to be featured within this video, they've gotten upset with me, implying that I'm a traitor to the town and that it really isn't that bad, that me saying these things about history, even though they are facts, is in some way a dishonesty in presentation of the actual culture and feel of the area. But to hide these things from you that the town was built on would be too much in the spirit of the American South and Morganton, and would through that be disingenuous. Like all places, there are all types of people here. It is a very complex ecosystem of conflicting values, and all I can tell you about is history, and things that I've witnessed firsthand through my own bias. The first Pride event, for instance, was held in 2016, and there was a large number who attended the protest of the Pride event, one of which threatened to shoot people who attended. The man, Scott Bumgardner Sr., said on Facebook, "F Slurfest is going on in Morganton today." Another local, Kenny Ayetz, commented, "Target practice," to which Bumgardner replied, "Yes, sir." No legal action was taken against either of them. Things change, yet they stay the same. And it's not like Morganton is even the worst in the area. If you were to travel to, say, Lincolnton nearby, you would find much more overt hostility and hate in that part of the state. I'm just trying to present you with my view of the current situation as I see it. It is a place that fosters hateful, bitter, judgmental, ignorant, angry, dogmatically religious, and wildly suspicious country people. I hardly know anyone who actually says nice things about each other who lives there. It is a town fueled by spite, covered in an oozing guise of false friendliness. Everyone here thinks that everyone else is the weird one, and that they are always right. Folks from Morganton gossip more than anyone else from North Carolina that I've ever met. In most places, you would talk about things that you had watched, something you enjoyed, an interesting thing that happened to you that week. Evenings in Morganton are spent complaining about the perceived wrongdoings of other people from town. They are clinically obsessed with other people's business. They see no issue with this because they have, by and large, never lived anywhere else. It is the normal cultural way of things here. What would be in other places an immediately forgotten social slight is here the topic of discussion for the next 3 days. I'm certain that the existence of this video is an event that will be talked about in some circles for years. They talk badly about their neighbors if they've gone a few days longer than they should without cutting their grass. There was a small controversy recently when someone bought a plot of land and built a modular home on it, because it was perceived that it made everyone else who lived near it look bad. It is a place obsessed with optics. There is a massive industrial chicken slaughterhouse right in the middle of town, and the whole area is ripe with the smell of death night and day. I took a friend here once for lunch, and we had to pull over because they got sick from the smell when we got close to town. It is stronger than you would imagine it to be. There is an out-of-control situation with drugs, and a disproportionate amount of homeless people for a population of this size, that those with power do not seem to care about, as these issues have only gotten worse as time goes by. Downtown, you will step over used paraphernalia past homeless people on every corner doing drugs, while you walk down streets with houses so big that you feel embarrassed to look at them. It is a retirement community that acts as a microcosm of the failed greed worship of the boomer mindset. While collecting footage for this video, a homeless man came up to me and asked if I was trying to take pretty pictures of downtown. I told him I was, and he said good luck trying to get nice photographs without any homeless people in them. He wished me a good day, gave me a fist bump, and went on his way. And he's right. It's something I've made a strong effort not to do, and it was very difficult to get shots without any of the local homeless in them. I didn't want to photograph them from a distance like they were easily spooked wild animals. I didn't want to ask them for close-up shots to be in this because that too would be exploitative. In addition to this, the only people who actually got mad at me for filming for this were the rich people in these mega homes, who would run out and ask me why I was in front of their house on their sidewalk, which is public property, taking pictures of their nice things, something which isn't against the law. Although one of them went back into their house, came back outside with their large dog on a leash, and chased me back to my car, which is illegal. When instances of this would happen, I began to use the story that I was an architecture student, studying the design of their lovely homes, which did the trick. A little charm and flattery will get you anywhere in this world. As I was editing this project, there was a town hall meeting to discuss the homeless situation in the area, and no resolution was reached as to what they should do about the problem. It mostly turned into a situation where those with money could complain about all those nasty homeless people. One man was mad that the soup kitchen was located near all of these shamefully massive homes, in which he lives in one of them. You can stand in the yard of these million-dollar homes and have a clear view of the homeless mission center. Someone asked him where it should instead be located, and he said Hickory, which is the next county over. It is a dying town. Everyone who's born here moves away. I no longer live here. My brother lives in New York. When I go back to town, I literally have no one to visit besides family, unless it is a holiday. You either leave when you're 20 or you stay until you're 90, and this is by design. As a previous mayor, Mel Cohen, decided that the best route for the town to take would be to attract older people with money to retire here, and actively pushed away anything that anyone younger than 60 would find fun. This has moderately improved in the most recent decade. There is now something that could somewhat be described as a nightlife to Morganton, but the town has never recovered from this spiral. Businesses like Treat, Brown Mountain Bottle Works, the 2 new bookstores, Homer's, Fontaflora, all of which have come in the past decade, show a changing culture within Morganton. That coincided largely with the former mayor of 30 years, Mel Cohen, being replaced by a more future-focused Ronnie Thompson in 2015. Things are actively getting better here. They have great little spots. The town is not without its shining places. But growth is slow. There are many people who live happy lives here. Many people who love the town, love this place. But I don't think it is inaccurate to say that Morganton, which once was seen as the central small town of the foothills, has been left behind and stunted in growth as other places like Marion, that once were seen as hit communities, have catered to a younger, more fun demographic and exploded economically. The biggest thing that has happened to Morganton in recent years is this giant pit in the ground that is centered around a new Walmart, whereas Marion now has a thriving downtown area that I actively enjoy hanging out at. If I ever do anything social in this area of the state, it's in Marion. When I'm in Morganton, I never leave the house after 8 p.m., because there just isn't anything to do unless you're drinking, and since everyone moved away, there's very few people to go drinking with. It is a bottomless and ravenous black hole that traps people. One of the members of a local North Carolina Durham area band, Mipso, is from here, and performs a song that I suspect is about the town called Get Out While You Can. I'm almost 30 and it is still intrinsically a part of me. For a time, CB radio users referred to Morganton by the handle of Crazy Town, a reference to Broughton Hospital, which had been originally constructed as the Western North Carolina Insane Asylum, which is a locally iconic building. But I don't think that is the only reason that it was called that. There is a ghost of shame that hangs over Morganton, and has been there since the summer of 1833. This is, of course, in addition to the blood shame that has loomed over the entire South since the creation of this country. In 1831, a 15-year-old girl named Frankie Silvers, who lived in a cabin in the remote wilderness, took an axe and killed her alcoholic and abusive, much older husband that she had been forced to marry. She cut him into pieces and with the help of her father and brother buried them throughout the country wilds. This was not discovered until the next spring with the melting snow, and a trial was held. Everyone in Morganton agreed that Charles had been abusive, including all government officials involved. But women at this time were not allowed to give testimony even in their own defense. Frankie was not allowed to argue on her behalf that what she had done may have been in the name of self-preservation. And on July 12, 1833, the town of Morganton dragged a 15-year-old girl out into a field and publicly hanged her. She would be the first white woman executed in the United States, a fact which is often wrongly attributed to the hanging of Mary Surratt in 1865 for her involvement with the Lincoln assassination. During the Prohibition era, the entire county was known as Bloody Burke. The Appalachian Mountains were largely populated by Scotch and Irish immigrants. With them, they brought many cultural things that were important to them, that have become standards of Southern life. Their music, which melded with African slave musical styles into the banjo-based bluegrass genre that we know today. And they also brought with them their knowledge of making whiskey. And when alcohol was outlawed in America in 1919, the Appalachian area became synonymous with violent battles over the distillation and distribution of home-brewed corn and wheat-based moonshine. It is a reputation that has never gone away since then, and things such as the entire brand of the state of Tennessee and NASCAR are known to come from these complications. But above all other counties in North Carolina, Burke was known to be especially brutal in the bloodshed that occurred in this period. Not just in fighting off the police, but also in different confrontations in the many underground bars that could be found here. It very much established a reputation for itself. My great-grandfather ran an illegal still in this time. This would continue long past Prohibition as Burke remained a dry county after this, and would go on into the 1960s when it was voted that an ABC store should be opened. And this only happened because of an infamous 1966 incident, where 62-year-old moonshiner Boyce C. Liverette, who was the subject of a manhunt, was cornered by officials in a cabin where he was hiding in the wilderness of Burke County. He unloaded his rifle on the police and shot Sheriff David Oakes in the throat, killing him. Prohibition ended in Burke County to finally stop the violence after this. Before the legalization of alcohol, though, the area was a nightmare. In one illegal bar, a man was said to have entered one night and was immediately stabbed from behind his shoulder, sliding down his back with the blade exiting near his ass. He turned around in shock, and the man holding the weapon shouted, "Oh my God, what have I done? I thought you were someone else." In 1944, 10 people were killed in a single night in the Glen Alpine area of the county. 2 brothers once held a duel over a disagreement, and both died in the process. One man, killed by a point-blank shotgun blast to the chest in a honky-tonk, was quoted as saying with his last breath, "I'm still the meanest son of a bitch in Burke County." It is said that there was a common joke in North Carolina that was told throughout the 1940s and 50s, that said they'd rather be charged with murder in Burke County than with theft, because if convicted they would get less time. It is and always has been known as an exceptionally weird and lawless place. The Brown Mountain Lights of Morganton are a phenomenon that is still unexplained to this day, also known as the ghost lights. They are momentary spectral flashes that can be seen in and hovering about the nearby mountains at night, that have been reported to have been seen by thousands of people for hundreds of years. There are Civil War testimonies from terrified soldiers who had seen them. Officially, the United States government has investigated them 3 times. In each instance, they found nothing and had no explanation for the sightings. Nobody has any idea what they are, but I can assure you, they are very much real. The 21st episode of Season 6 of The X-Files, titled Field Trip, takes place in the Morganton area and is about the lights. There are some lovely people who live here as well, just like there are everywhere. There are kind, genuinely loving, gentle, friendly, great people who live in Morganton. I love people. I have an unhealthy fascination with people. I don't mean to paint the town badly, but I want to give you a good representation of the area as I see it, from the perspective of someone who lived here for about 15 years. There is an intrinsic sadness to this place, a looming country melancholy. When reading it, I can't help in my mind drawing comparisons to the fictional Derry. Most people I know my age that have long since moved away see it in a similar light. They would tell you that it is a deeply unsettling and depressing place where some good people live. But to play both sides, if you were to look at Morganton in the way that they would like you to, they would probably want you to see it through the perspective of the often mocked and self-given town nickname, Nature's Playground. Table Rock sits on the horizon overlooking the town and can be seen from most places. A completely flat plateau of a mountain that is a popular hiking spot for locals, that sits in the Linville Gorge, a 12,000-acre landmass of beautiful and terrifying untouched wilderness. It is so vast that more than 50 people go missing in it every single year, and many of them never return alive. Morganton, and more so the mountain itself, is the subject of the science fiction horror Jules Verne novel Master of the World, in which it is believed that a nearby mountain is actually a volcano that is erupting, but in reality, it is discovered to be a massive, secret aircraft that has landed in the hills because of mechanical failures. And the aircraft is so large that it flattens the mountain, resulting in the Table Rock that we know today. The novel would later be adapted into a film starring Vincent Price. Surprisingly, this is not well known in town, and literally every single time I've brought it up to people who live here, they are unaware of this book or film's existence. Although Verne, who both was born and died in France, never actually visited the area and just liked the idea of a flat mountaintop. This is evident by his very funny description of the town in the opening of the novel. Morganton is but a small town, built upon strata of the Jurassic period. Particularly rich in coal, its mines give it some prosperity. It also has numerous pleasant mineral waters, so that the season there attracts many visitors. Around Morganton is rich farming country with broad fields of grain. It lies in the midst of swamps, covered with mosses and reeds. Evergreen forests rise high up the mountain slopes. All that the region lacks is the wells of natural gas, that invaluable natural source of power, light, and warmth, so abundant in most of the Allegheny valleys. If you can't tell from the footage in this video, Morganton is hundreds of miles away from the swampy areas of North Carolina. The event from the 70s that the town would prefer to be remembered by is the events surrounding Sam Irving Jr., a Morganton native, who would go on to become a North Carolina senator, and would lead the Watergate hearings that would result in the resignation of President Richard Nixon. He would then retire to Morganton after the hearings, and begin a new career as a humorist, and can be found with the likes of Phyllis Diller, Mae West, William Shatner, and Sammy Davis Jr. on the celebrity gimmick album Golden Throats 2, singing Bridge Over Troubled Water. There is a community on the outskirts of Morganton known as Salem. It is where I am standing currently at a microphone recording this audio to you, in the spare bedroom of my aunt's house. It is where all the audio for my videos is recorded. It is an important part of my childhood. I used to go trick-or-treating in the Mountain Shadows community here. I grew up attending Salem United Methodist Church. I designed and built a garden at that church as my Eagle project in Scouts, and it still remains there to this day. I went to Salem Elementary School, the same school where Joanne attended when she was young. And I just think that it's funny that in this story we have yet another witch from Salem. It may surprise some to learn that she also was raised in a religious household. Her family were Southern Baptists. She was a Southern Baptist for a very long time. She even claims, "I was married to a minister's son for 20 years, but that just didn't work out at the end." When asked how this relates to her powers and her witchcraft, she would elaborate on her beliefs by saying, "I study and worship from the Living Bible, the same as other people. I was raised a Baptist. My only belief other than that is I can communicate with the spirits of the dead. I don't hold black masses or pray to Satan." If you remember correctly, in the second book of Samuel, the 28th chapter, it says that Saul was a man of God, yet he went to a medium to have the spirit of Samuel conjured up, and they talked with each other. All witches were mediums then, and they couldn't have all been bad, or they wouldn't have had any dealings with the very religious persons. So I can't go along with saying that a witch is an evil person. After her first marriage, though, Joanne would become more of an outcast within the Morganton community. Her neighbors at the time described her as strange and peculiar. On her life at Grey Shadows, she would say, "I live alone here with the spirits. They're the best friends I have. I have drifted off into my own little world. I don't get close to people." She has always had a love of theatrics. Her home, even in this time before 1976, was used to express this. Always decorated as if it were almost Halloween, very eccentric in style, and especially decorated around Halloween. Anytime she has a new guest in her home, she tells them to take a seat in any chair that they are spiritually called to, as it will aid her in reading their energy. Once a chair is chosen, she always tells them that they picked the haunted one, no matter which one it is. In 1975, Fred Ramsey separated from his wife Dorothy and moved into an apartment complex on Lenore Street next to Grey Shadows that was owned by Joanne. It was said by people in town soon after that the two had quickly grown close, and that some even recalled seeing him on multiple occasions helping her do repairs on her vacant apartments and installing new carpeting. He began to fill a somewhat personal handyman position for her properties. They both, over the years since 1976, were adamant that their connection was strictly business and platonic. Although, many people in town gossiped that this was not true. Some were even bold enough to do so in the paper. It is said that he believed in her powers and sometime in early 1976 began to assist her with her evening seances. Although only one such instance on March 17th of that year can be fully confirmed. He convinced his daughter to come with him to her house 3 days later on the 20th, to try and contact her husband Buddy, who had taken his own life. Fred's brother Melvin Ramsey was also said to be at this seance that was held in one of Joanne's empty apartments, where the party convened around her magic table that was brought over from her house. At one point, Joanne instructed Fred to close his eyes and focus. She asked him what he saw in his mind's eye. "I see a black car going over a cliff," he told her. "What else?" she asked. "A puff of smoke. Do you see a number?" 015. "Anything else?" Joanne asked him. "Nothing," he said. It should be noted that Dorothy Ramsey's street address was at this time 510 Mole Street. During this event, Joanne looked to be experiencing a great pain. She closed her eyes and told those in attendance, "I feel a coldness. I see death. Look above my shoulder and see who it is." Fred then was said to have looked up in the air and screamed, and then started to cry, and began describing a woman's figure. Here Joanne began to cry as well. "It's Dot," she said. "It's Dot." The next day, Fred Ramsey personally was the one who called Dorothy to tell her that she was predicted to die by car accident, and then, according to the News and Observer, proceeded to take out an insurance policy on Dorothy Ramsey, who was found dead in her home on Mall Street on April 10th, at the age of 38. On April 14th, the cover story for the News and Observer, which is the largest circulated paper in the state published out of Raleigh, ran the story of Joanne's seance on their cover. It said, in part, the following. Joann Denton, who allegedly predicted correctly at a seance in her home that a woman would die on April 10th, has been charged by the woman's daughter with violating North Carolina's anti-witchcraft law. Miss Denton lives in a house adorned with the sign, Gray Shadows. The house is open to the public on Halloween. Miss Denton is accused of the misdemeanor of engaging in the practice of fortune-telling and the craft of raising people from the dead. She is to appear in court April 27th to answer the charge, which carries a maximum of 6 months in jail and a $500 fine. Her lawyer said she will remain silent for now, but she'll have all kinds of statements to make later on. The charge stems from the death of Dorothy Ramsey, 38, of Morganton. An autopsy performed Wednesday said she died of a high level of drugs and alcohol in her blood. Mrs. Denton is supposed to have said that she would die in an auto accident. Police said they have uncovered no evidence of foul play, but that they found suicide notes in her home and a number of pills in her kitchen. Catherine Carpenter, who signed the warrant against Miss Denton, said her mother was involved in an accident the week of her death, although she was not injured. Ms. Carpenter said her mother took a number of pills April 10th to calm herself. I believe it worked on her nerves. She just kept taking pills to calm her nerves down. I think this lady should be stopped because it works on your nerves to be told when you're going to die. And when the day comes, it really gets to you, she said. The Morganton News-Herald said Ramsey has been separated from his wife 6 months before her death, and had taken out a life insurance policy on her after the seance. In the time between March 20th and April 10th, Dorothy was said to have been extremely upset. Some described her as disturbed. She had previously been known to suffer nervous breakdowns, and was said by her daughter to have at one point undergone electroshock treatment, and those around her knew her to have a paranoid personality. Some of the behavior that she exhibited in this time was characteristic of some of her previous breakdowns. While the accident did not kill or injure Dorothy Ramsey in any way that could be observable by the naked eye, her daughter Catherine alleged that the incident is what pushed her over the edge into believing Joanne's prophecy, and is why she should have been held responsible for her death for making dangerous and irresponsible predictions. She would tell Psychic News on April 24, 1976, "My mother was very nervous after the car crash. She was under doctor's care and taking pills." Following the car accident, according to Esquire, Dorothy told her father, "Fred and his girlfriend are trying to get rid of me." "What girl?" her father asked her. "The witch." According to Newsweek, on the morning of April 10th, Miss Ramsey refused to leave her house. "She seemed nervous," said Kathy, "like she was scared to get in her car. She died that night with empty bottles of tranquilizers strewn in her apartment. An autopsy showed a high level of drugs and alcohol in her bloodstream, and her death was listed as suicide." In relation to this, a suicide note was said to have been found in her apartment as well. I have found this to be mentioned in several documents, including one saying that there was even multiple suicide notes found in her room. But I cannot find strong evidence of this actually existing, such as a photograph or transcript of what they may have said. And now, I am making an attempt to not editorialize in this section of the video, and I don't mean to imply anything here whatsoever. But it does seem odd, at least to me, that someone would be concerned one day that someone was trying to kill them, to the point that they decided not to leave their house anymore, out of a fear for their safety. And then, 2 days later, they take their own life. That seems odd to me. Joanne was arrested specifically on North Carolina General Statute 14-401.5, also known as the 1951 North Carolina Witchcraft Act. That was legal in 63 out of the 100 counties in the state, including, ironically, Transylvania County. It specifically in this case outlawed phrenology, palmistry, fortune-telling, clairvoyance, and other crafts of a similar kind. It was essentially an anti-carnival law, and its intended purpose as stated in the law was to regulate traveling rogues and fly-by-night con artists, who separated the ignorant and superstitious from their money. Denton's eventual public statement was one of innocence. "I did no wrong. I just had a vision she would die, and, of course she did. I'm a witch, but a white, not a black one who serves the devil. The doctors say Miss Ramsey died from the effects of alcohol and drugs. I had nothing to do with the death. It's just that I saw it. I get vivid visions." It is said by those around her that she seemed very confident going into the trial, and was unconcerned about the prospects that she may spend 6 months in prison. When asked why in the seance he had seen his wife's address backwards, Fred only said, "I loved my wife so much. I had her on my mind." Later that week, when Catherine was called to the funeral home to view the body, she was disgusted to see that a pink carnation that she had not picked out had been pinned to the lapel of her mother's funeral dress. She asked why they had done this, and they informed her that the flower had been delivered to them earlier that morning. A card had come with the flower inscribed only with the words, "From a friend." When asked who this friend was, the funeral parlor confirmed that Joann Denton had sent the flower, and had personally called them herself, to instruct that it was to be pinned to Dorothy's lapel. It was just like it was some kind of hex, Catherine would later say, and would confirm that this was the inciting incident to get law enforcement to look into Joann's involvement with her mother's death. The first magistrate that she spoke with refused to issue a warrant for Denton's arrest, feeling unsatisfied that there was any probable cause that any crimes had been committed, as well as an insufficient motive for the accused. Catherine was recorded as saying to the judge that Joann was a vampire, and that the only way to get rid of her was to drive a silver stake through her heart. On April 14th, Catherine had an appeal before a second judge, who was satisfied by her argument, and a warrant was issued for Joann's arrest. In the lead up to the trial, Joann's notoriety on a national level soared to an unprecedented level. It is a wild series of events, and you can imagine how large press media would have run with a story like this. A group of witches from the Salem, Massachusetts area came to Morganton and stayed for a time to support her. A preacher in South Carolina argued that Joann should have literally been burned at the stake in the Morganton town square to rid the town of her evil. This was her 15 minutes of fame, and was something that she was going to use to launch a new career off of. She told the press, "I can get my revenge against my enemies, and persecutors with my mind. I don't bother people unless they cross my path the wrong way. Then I have my ways of getting even with my mind. Sometimes it can be most unpleasant." On April 26, the charges against Joann Denton were dropped. The court dismissed the case on a technicality because Joann never charged money for her divinations, and that the Witchcraft Act specifically was designed to protect people from losing their money, and that she had in this mindset not actually broken any laws. They would further elaborate, saying that any charges and accusations were pure hearsay, and without benefit of sworn statement from any persons who were actually present during the alleged prediction. I have tried to find more information about what occurred that day. I have spoken with the police, and they said that they destroy records once they reach 20 years old, if they are not relevant to any ongoing investigations. I asked them if they would have any information at all about how an investigation from 1976 was conducted, who they spoke to, what their thought processes were, how the conclusions were made that something was ruled as a suicide, but they said they could not help me. I went to the clerk of court office to try and find a transcript of Denton's hearing, but they told me that they had no records older than 20 years, that I could petition to have records from Raleigh sent, but that would take a long time, and that I eventually would be sent an envelope in the mail. They had the case number on it and a short message saying that the case had been dismissed, and that they do not keep detailed transcripts of hearings that do not reach a conclusion. I went to the district attorney's office of Burke County, and they acted like it was almost laughable that someone was interested in seeing files or learning more information on the thoughts or motivations about a case that was ultimately dismissed in 1976. So the only things that we can go by are things that were reported in the paper. Everywhere that I look for more information about what happened in court, and how the evidence was collected and how certain things were determined, I get turned around. There's a massive blind spot in this story of what exactly happened between April 10th and April 26th of 1976. Nobody seems to have any way to tell me anything about the death of Dorothy Ramsey, other than it was something that happened. I don't even know what she looks like. I can't find any pictures of her, just lots of pictures of Joann. I don't even know where she's buried. I've tried finding Catherine Ramsey, but I don't know if she's still alive, and if so, if she still lives in Morganton. There are a few people on Facebook who match her general description and age in the area named Catherine. One of them, I believe, may be her. She is related to a man named Bill, who I believe might be Fred's brother, but I am far from certain about that. If it is her, though, then I have learned that I'm related to Catherine, and that Fred would be a cousin to me, which isn't terribly surprising, considering the size of the town. I know for a fact that there are some Ramseys that are my kin, Everyone is related to everyone here in some way. But again, just to reiterate, all that may not be true and is unconfirmed speculation on my part. In this moment though for Joanne, something that looked like it was going to become a prison sentence turned into a full-time career as a professional witch, framed within the camera's spotlight. At a press conference later that day, where she claimed that her predictions are not unlike the professions of weather forecasters, physicians, lawyers, almanacs, political strategists, and sportscasters, she had the following to say. I am God-fearing and law-abiding. We have a good court system and I will never intentionally violate the laws. However, the district attorney used good judgment in ordering a dismissal of the charges against me. I hope that Catherine Carpenter concurs with the action taken by the district attorney. Unless I am prohibited from doing so by the court, I will continue to exercise my special, God-given talents of fortune-telling and clairvoyance in Burke County. I will also continue to contribute the earnings from my practice to various charities. Her lawyer and representative, Douglas F. Powell, would release a further, more detailed statement to the press. We have received more than 100 inquiries from radio and television stations throughout the United States, and from newspapers and magazines in this country and many foreign countries. They want to know if she has supernatural powers, if she is a witch, if she will appear on national television shows, if she will give her life story to a magazine or newspaper publisher. Negotiations are now underway for an exclusive Joann Denton story. In no news document from the period have I ever found mention of the police looking into Fred Ramsey's connection to any of this. Soon after the trial was over, she hired 2 bodyguards, one named Randy Carver, as well as another man who went by the name of Zane Grey. I have also found evidence of him claiming that he is related to the Western author Zane Grey, and that it is a family name and not one that he explicitly took from the author. She would almost always travel with one of these 2 men, often accompanied as well by other unnamed followers. She was a medical technician at a center that's so close to my family home I could walk to it, which is a job that in this time did not in many cases require a college degree, and did not pay an outrageously substantial salary. But somehow, she had enough money to hire these men. She did own several properties around town that she was collecting rent from, but that does stick out to me. She says multiple times in this period that people from all over the country would mail her money to support her, but that she had always sent it back because she wouldn't feel right taking money for her God-given gift. But it should also be noted that accepting this money would have in this time been illegal because of the Witchcraft Act, and would have exposed her to possible attention from legal authorities. She would continue to work at the medical center, despite the large public events of her personal life, but according to one source would quit a few years later after she had been at the center for 14 years. On May 1st, 1 week later, Joanne announced her next death prediction, her own mother, Clarence Denton. She said to a reporter that day, I told my dear mother that she would go on August 11th. I had a vision of her funeral, told her she was going to die. Her mother was also quoted by the press saying, my daughter is never wrong. I'm prepared to go. It doesn't worry me at all. She has even spoken to the funeral director. She's amazing. When contacted about this, the funeral director did confirm, saying, the older Mrs. Denton talked about dying later this year. Joanne claims to have accurately predicted her father's death, and her mother supposedly confirms this. Joanne says that she didn't even cry at his funeral because she had foreseen it in her visions. In her mind, she'd already attended it. On May 6th, however, the News Herald ran a story that said that the 73-year-old Clarence was spotted in public, and someone asked her about the prediction and she reportedly looked confused, said that she had never heard that her own death had been foretold by her daughter, and was quoted as saying, Joanne hasn't told me that. My time is not coming until the Lord says so. Foolishness. Do you take all that seriously? She also said that she had not made funeral arrangements for herself. It hurt me, she would later say. I don't like that publicity. When reached for comment, Joanne reportedly became very angry over this, saying that everything around her mother's death was supposed to be a private matter, as it was a family affair and shouldn't be reported on in the news. She told the reporter about her own mother's relation to the press. She'd better keep her mouth shut. The following was also said to have happened in the following days. Mrs. Denton said her daughter called her this morning and told her not to talk to the press. In that conversation, the mother reportedly told her daughter that at no time had any predictions of an August 11th date been mentioned. That week on national television, Joanne made several more predictions, one of which was that she would come into a large sum of money, at least $1 million, because of several business ventures, such as her upcoming book. She also said a man that she didn't like, by the name of Mark Allen Basham, would die within 1 year of a car wreck. Upon further investigation, I've learned that at the time, Mark was the boyfriend of Catherine Carpenter, and was supposed to be the future son-in-law of Dorothy Ramsey before her death, who had been very publicly critical of Joanne, and was said to have personally taken the pink carnation off Dorothy's body and brought it to Joanne's home from the funeral parlor and threw it in her face when she opened the door. But that is, at this point, probably a rumor turned urban legend. That week, the News-Herald contacted Sossman Funeral Home, and Calvin Sossman confirmed that a funeral-based insurance policy had been taken out on Joanne's mother, and that there had been advance arrangements made for her funeral, even though she was still alive and well. The same article ends with the following quote: "Asked if she has profited from the publicity generated by her case, Mrs. Denton said she had no comment. However, she said she lives comfortably." Years later, Joanne's mother would sit down with Jim Church of the Stimulator magazine for one of the only interviews in her life about her daughter, and would say the following: "It should also be remembered here that Joanne was a twin, born the same day as her brother, Jody. She came here squealing and she's been squealing ever since. I had not asked for her. I became pregnant, and the time came on January 25th, 1934. It was a Friday night. At 11 o'clock the baby came. It was a girl. I was disappointed. I had not asked for her. Then Dr. Billings said, 'There is another.' I prayed for it to be my baby boy. It was. He was born at 11:30. I had my family back. She was a pretty baby. Mean from the beginning, but very smart and very pretty. I learned to love Joanne. I love her now, but she's always been extra. She always played alone with her puppets, her mud pies, her bugs, grasshoppers, flies, and spiders. Joanne was a loner, mean, sometimes cruel. I do not believe in witches. Joanne was born mean. Always she was mean, but she is not a witch. None of us are witches. She started calling herself a witch and doing these crazy things after she left home. I would not let her do it here. You watch her. She'll get you in." Joanne began to dress in black publicly at all times, would wear a silver spider on her finger and a necklace made of bones. She would become the embodiment of gothic notoriety. Someone would ask her why she hasn't used her powers to become extremely wealthy by predicting the stock market, and she admitted that she had invested and lost a good deal of money, lamenting, "It didn't work. Maybe I didn't have my skull with me that day, or maybe I should have played the market when the moon was right." In this conversation, she also confirms that she has recently put a curse on Gray Shadows, so that when she died, she would haunt it for the rest of time, saying, "My spirit will live forever, and it will live in this house. Nobody else will be able to live in this house. I put a curse on it." I've thought about going and knocking on the door of those who now live in what was Gray Shadows, to ask them if they have ever experienced a curse, but ultimately have decided against it. On August the 10th, the eve of her predicted death, Clarence Denton sat down with the News-Herald. In this interview, she said, "I don't care who predicts so-and-so is going to die. When God gets ready, he'll take me. I'm in good health, and he probably won't take me tomorrow." The front page story of the August 12th News-Herald ran with the headline, "Told you so." "There ain't no such thing as a witch," Clarence told the newspaper. "I told you it wouldn't come true." She said she hoped now that she didn't die, that the attention surrounding her daughter would go away, calling her act nonsense. Joanne, from what I can tell, did not make a public comment about her mother not dying, but her attorney Douglas Powell said the prediction had probably been a false one, that Joanne had been pressured into making because of the considerable attention that she had been receiving, and that the prediction of Clarence's death got a lot more attention than had been anticipated. Joanne was soon after given a short-run television show on Channel 3 out of Charlotte called Voices from Grey Shadows, and a book deal that, to my knowledge, would never end up being published, with a proposed title of The World Behind Grey Shadows. As this went along, her fame only continued to grow, and in October, the Dorothy Ramsey situation would be the cover story for that month's Halloween issue of Esquire. Although she didn't like how the writer, James C.A., talked about her, said multiple times that it was her least favorite piece that had ever been written about her, and said soon after it was published that it would not be the last time that Esquire would hear from her, not by U.S. mail, but by things that go bump in the night. It should be noted that the Esquire article is by far the most negative thing about Joanne that I have seen published about her from this time period. The article, titled The Wicked Witch of North Carolina, is, as far as I see it, the most professional work by an actual respected journalist on a national level that she ever encountered. It is the only time that she was given any real scrutiny to this degree, the only time she was taken seriously, not as a carnival sideshow act. The article is the only time I've seen someone come close to saying that she did harm in print, and it probably made her feel vulnerable and scared, I imagine. She began to travel, doing seances as public events, both in person as well as on television and on the radio. There are short-lived discussions in Hollywood for a Joann Denton movie. As 1977 rolled around, it became clear that the tale of Joann Denton and her marvelous powers would not die and become an isolated incident, but instead a cultural moment that would define the town and region for decades to come. It is said that in the time after the death of Dorothy Ramsey, Joanne and Fred were often tense around each other, and publicly did not have many kind things to say about each other. Sometime in either August or September of that year, the roof of the apartment that Fred was renting from Joanne collapsed while he was asleep. It did not kill him, but he ended up staying 2 days in Grace Hospital. Joanne even took credit for this in the Esquire interview, saying that the roof fell from residual energy from a powerful spell that she had been casting in her home. The reporter notes that she seems pleased that this happened. But as time goes on, the press quickly started to lose interest in Joanne, and her actions start to become more outlandish, out of what I perceive as a need for public attention or validation. And some of what she says in the public's eye of Morganton and the surrounding area made her be viewed as a menace. In one such article, the following can be found. Recently, Mrs. Denton made the newspapers again when she predicted the collapse of the new Valley Hills Mall in Hickory. She steadfastly refuses to amend her prediction, although experts insist the mall is sturdy. I should let you know here that the Valley Hills Mall is still very much there. This is it as it stands and functions today, and I can safely confirm 40 years later to you that it is indeed sturdy. This prediction deeply upset the New York investors who had built the mall, and to counteract her claims, they flew in the nationally famous television psychic Jeannie Dixon to Hickory to personally inspect the mall and tell everyone that it was in no danger of collapsing. It should also be acknowledged, though, that some of her predictions from this period are weirdly accurate, or close enough to accurate that it should be acknowledged here. It is said in this time that she predicted a man's car wreck, as well as told a woman that she would be diagnosed with a blood disease, and several months later would be told by doctors that she has leukemia. At one point, she was quoted as saying, "I had another vision the other day. I never know when I'm going to have one. They come on me all of a sudden sometimes. I saw a small airplane hit the Statue of Liberty, right in the elbow on the upraised arm. I also saw the number 8. I'm not sure if that means 8 people or not." In 1979, during a continued legal battle over taxes, she put a curse on a Morganton official, and he was said to soon after contract hepatitis, and would have to leave his job. But also, this is very possibly a Nostradamus-like effect, where if you say enough plausible yet outlandish things enough times, then some of them are bound to become true. But in the spirit of fairness, I did feel as if they should be mentioned. One thing that weirdly has to be brought up here is that Elvis died on August 16th, 1977, which is important to this story and will come up several times from here on, as her brand would kind of be attached to his persona. Later that year, WOLS out of Asheville filmed and broadcast a television special where she tried to raise the spirit of Elvis from the grave. She was not successful in this attempt. It became very apparent in all of this that Joanne had the ability to say anything to anybody with a straight face. In later years, a reporter visited Grey Shadows, and Joanne looked her right in the eye and told her without smiling, "Elvis Presley's spirit lives here. I conjured him up during a seance. This table here jumped up and knocked 2 people down when Elvis appeared." In an article from around this time by reporter Sue Allen Presley, who contacted Joanne about raising Elvis from the dead, asked her about Dorothy Ramsey, and she said the following: "No, I did not know the woman who died. Her husband rented one of my apartments. He asked for a seance, I held one. The woman's name came up, linked with death. I never met her. Her daughter thinks I should be put away. Nobody does that to Mrs. Denton." All of this growing, building, constant need for attention came to a grand final outlandish act, with Joann Denton's funeral on July 22nd, 1978. The previous month, a public invitation to the entire town was the headline for the newspaper. All were welcome to attend the end of the Joann Denton saga. One article covering the event read, "There's no doubt about it. Saturday is going to be a special day in the extraordinary life and death of Joann Denton, Morganton's self-proclaimed witch." The 44-year-old Mrs. Denton announced back in June that on Saturday, July 22nd at 3 p.m., she will be the host of honor for her own funeral. The public and members of the news media have been invited to watch Mrs. Denton go through the paces of her funeral. Mrs. Denton has said that she will lie in an open casket for 30 minutes prior to the ceremony. Following the funeral ceremony, Mrs. Denton's body will be placed in her plot at the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church Cemetery in the Enola community. Members of the church have publicly protested Mrs. Denton's intention to use their cemetery Saturday, but Mrs. Denton reportedly will go ahead with her original plans. Mrs. Denton may not be serious about actually dying, but she is deadly serious about the funeral. Earlier this week, she distributed her obituary to area newspapers. The members of the Pleasant Hill Church voted unanimously in favor of a resolution that called Denton's proposed funeral for herself sacrilegious and damaging to the image of the church. When asked how the church planned to stop her intentions, Reverend Larry Klein responded, "We're just going to tell her no and see where we go from there." When pressed on what the response of the church would be if she was determined to hold the funeral, he responded, "We just haven't crossed that bridge yet." The following day, Joanne publishes a letter in the newspaper. "I don't know how the members of Pleasant Hill Baptist Church brewed up an ill feeling towards my funeral and felt as if it would hurt the image of the church, and also felt as if it was sacrilegious. My intentions are not to hurt the image of the church, nor do I intend for it to be sacrilegious. Neither do I consider it funny or comical. I consider my funeral to be respected and religious and carried out in a religious manner, just as any other funeral. Everyone who survives on this earth has a right to have a funeral. I plan to will my body to science, and I have the right as a citizen of the United States and a resident of North Carolina to use the plot at Pleasant Hill Baptist Church that I bought and paid for myself." On Saturday, the line to walk by and view Joanne in her casket was over an hour long. Allegedly, before people were let in to view her, she said to those in the room as she got into the casket, "Better tell me bye." She then proceeded to fidget for several moments, trying to get into a comfortable position to sit still in, and said, "Just give me time to get adjusted. This is my first funeral." There were so many who tried to get inside that the yard outside of the funeral ceremony was full of people. It was described at the time as carnival-like. People were talking and laughing. The police were standing by ready to break it up if the situation were to get out of hand. Hired girls in black dresses circulated holding ceremonial candelabras, and one of Joanne's assistants was selling Polaroids of her in the casket for $1 apiece. One woman in attendance, Laura Pfeiffer, told a reporter, "She hasn't had her name in the paper recently, so I guess she had to do something real drastic to get people to come see her again." Another man, 70-year-old Red Long, said, "I came out here just for the hell of it, and to take some pictures. Before she climbed into the casket, she wanted me to kiss her, and I told her, Hell no, I ain't gonna kiss no witch. Her bodyguard, Zane Grey, claimed to be an ordained minister and officiated her funeral services. They had several hundred in attendance. He opened with the words, "This is a serious situation. Mrs. Denton believed in God and loved God." On the way to Pleasant Hill Baptist Church's cemetery, Morganton police officer Leon Foss issued tickets to any car in the fake funeral procession that went through any red lights, including one to a reporter from the Charlotte Observer. My uncle performed the trumpet for Joanne's graveside service, and can be pictured at the event here. He played the hymn, "How Great Thou Art," as the pallbearers brought her to the grave. Before she was lowered into the ground, Zane Grey sprinkled a green substance on her body, and Joanne was magically resurrected. She opened her eyes and smiled at everyone by the gravesite. As she crawled out of the casket, she laughed and said to the crowd, "I took a cramp in my foot and had to take my shoes off." She then got into the driver's seat of the hearse and led everyone back to Grey Shadows for the reception. The coffin from this funeral would remain in her living room at Grey Shadows from then on. When asked about it, she would say, "I sometimes get in it and shut the lid. It's a great place to meditate." In an unusually candid interview with Jim Church, she opened up a bit on the emotional reasoning for why she wanted the funeral. "Oh, you know how people talk at funeral homes and funerals. Don't he or she look natural? Thought so much of him or her. He or she was always so kind to everyone. What will we do now that he or she is gone? All that malarkey. Now think, have you ever heard of anyone that's lying in a casket ever doing anything bad?" The preacher always assures the survivors that the soul of the loved one has gone to heaven. Nobody ever goes to hell. I just wanted to be there and hear what they had to say about me. One of the most potentially dangerous moves that Joanne takes in her life comes in the form of a handwritten prediction, notarized on March 28, 1981, saying that she had received a vision of the identity of the person responsible for the Atlanta child murders. She said that his last name would be Williams, that he was going to be a black native to Atlanta, and that he was a photographer. It is largely considered that this prediction led the police to narrow their search to fit this description, and arrested Wayne Williams on July 21, 1981. A local black photographer who lived in Atlanta. Although the state produced a large amount of evidence against Williams, to this day in prison he maintains his innocence. Many members in the community, and several of the victims' parents at the time, believed that the police had found the wrong man. The FBI and other organizations, on up through 2020, have continued to look into how the evidence was collected and handled in this case. And the Department of Justice has said that the initial investigation failed to meet professional standards. I'm not saying that Williams did or did not do these things. I have not personally researched the case enough to make a statement like that. But I will say that it is pretty clear that Denton could have possibly derailed this at some point with her prediction, and the attention that it got. That she used her media power to inject herself into something that should have been left entirely to authorities, blurring that line of entertainment and crime. With her newfound fame, Joanne began to use her influence in more questionable ways. The very reason she is known is a bit of a grotesquerie, and if that is what you are known for and trying to build a brand off of, in certain ways that can and will become dangerous. The local newspaper describes the feeling of embarrassment at the time that the town had about the situation being national news. That story went on for weeks and months before it finally fizzled out. We were glad to see it go. Not only because of the violence it did to our fair city, but also because it wasn't funny. It had a ghoulishness about it that got worse with each new sick twist. As part of the Grey Shadows brand that she was cultivating, she began trying to help the police with more investigations. She sounded gleeful as she talked about it. "And this tax thing, honey, don't you worry about it, 'cause it's just a drop in the cauldron compared to all I've got cooking right now. There's my seances, and the murder cases I help out on, and Halloween coming up and my book. I'm glad of all the publicity I've gotten, because more people hear about me and come to me for help with their problems. I do a lot of counseling. I contact the police because I feel I'm doing the community a service. But it can be very frustrating when you've given someone information and they don't do anything with it." And reconciling with trying to cultivate this image of a dark figure with the power of divination seems to be something that was on her mind a lot in relation to this. In that same interview, she said, "You do not play around with these things. A girl once played around with this, and saw what she shouldn't have, and clawed her own eyes out. I have found out that with my power, I can hurt people, and that's a little scary. In building this reputation for herself, she also would rely on fantastical, hyperbolic, or even downright false accounts of things that had happened to make people fear her powers and grow her infamy among the Morganton locals, spreading false accounts of people who didn't heed her warnings. One such tale she told a reporter. In one seance, 3 boys were laughing and carrying on. I told them to stop, but they didn't. They started to leave. I told them that if they left, they could be dead before they reached their car. That settled them down. But I saw that nothing could be done with them here. That's when the middle one levitated right off the ground. His friends took him to their car. They'd gotten no further than just down the road when they wrecked. All 3 of them died. Soon her very appearance in public would be enough to make headlines. At one point, she appeared in court with her entourage to support her friend who was suing a man for assaulting her, and Joanne being present was enough to draw reporters and land her in the newspaper. One asked her if she was going to use magic to sway the outcome of the case, to which she responded, "That was accomplished the night before, under the full moon during the eclipse. I have already done my work." But internally at times, she claimed that there was a conflict between her fame and the way that she said her powers worked, which resulted in occasional false predictions, because she was expected as a public person with powers to be able to use them on the spot. She would say, "In the first place, spirits aren't likely to appreciate being called for fun. You need to have a good reason to communicate with the dead." Often when called out for having given a prediction that did not come true, her defense would be characteristic of this. But she also was known to do good within the town. Her entire career, she was known to host benefits and charities to help those in need. She was very well known within the community to use her power and her platform to assist those if she learned that they needed her help. Every Halloween, she would travel to a different children's hospital to entertain, and she would hold a public seance in her home for anyone who wanted to attend. But it is clear she had much larger ambitions for herself in mind. As the 1970s turned into the 1980s, Joanne's ride to fame would continue on into the Satanic Panic era, and some would begin to fear her for her supposed abilities. One interviewer in this time arrived at her house, and she handed him a slip of paper. On it, she had written the number 2852, and said that that morning she experienced a psychic vision, that the number was in some way connected to the reporter, and she asked him if he knew why, because she did not. He told her that he had recently, on August 28th, broken his arm, which had been exactly 52 days ago. Many within the town began to express discontent that years into this process, Joanne had continued to dominate the papers and press, and that, as a town, they would like to move past the grisly Dorothy Ramsey event and recapture their previous image as a wholesome, witchless town. Small towns like Mount Airy and Morganton in western North Carolina had been the inspiration for the fictional town of Mayberry in the Andy Griffith Show, a physical embodiment of that 1960s American core value, and many didn't appreciate that had been replaced on a global scale with a singular monolithic image of Joann Denton. Many would make remarks against her in the opinion section of the paper, but she had her defenders as well. One woman, Eula Jackson, wrote the following in the local paper in this time: "I get rather bored lately when I pick up the News Herald and read the open forum. All I read is about witchcraft, occult, and Satanism. And it appears all these people are writing against Joann Denton. The people of Burke County should let Joanne live her own life. It is her business. I saw her in the Burke County courtroom several months ago, and she had her skull head and broom with her. I thought this was rather weird, but that was her privilege. Joann Denton has her own lifestyle, and I will admit it is rather strange. But she has the right to live her own life. The people against Joanne should open their closet doors and let their skeletons out. I am sure the hidden secrets would make great news in the gossip column of the newspaper." To this, Joanne would say, "I live my life and don't worry what others think. I could get away from all this if I wanted to, and I don't. I stand up for what I believe, and others are sometimes turned off by that. Many people are afraid to come here and walk in my house. My dear, if they only knew what I've seen between these four walls. Over the course of this decade, people had grown tired of the constant noise with each instance of Denton doing something outrageous. And the paper itself was accused of being sensationalistic, publishing a front-page article every time she did something to sell papers. One such public comment at the time, from a woman named Linda Bowman, reads, "I just can't sit back any longer and say nothing. I have read and read and read about Morganton's worldwide witch, till I'm sick. I have always loved the News Herald, but why can't you give your readers something better to read than tales about witches? I can honestly say that I do believe in witches. Why? Because I was a witch for nearly 8 years. So I strongly disagree with what Mrs. Denton said in the News Herald Monday. A witch is not a Satan worshipper. Wrong. She claims to be a witch, yet the only way to do this is through Satan worshipping. There is no good or bad witch. A witch is a witch, and they all come from one place, and that is Satan. I thank God I'm out of the hell I was in with witchcraft. I'm a born-again Christian, filled with the Holy Ghost. I just pray Mrs. Denton sees the light before she's lost in eternal darkness and damnation." Something to acknowledge here is that at the time Morganton had a population of roughly 15,000 people. It hardly has more than that today. Like I said, prime example of stagnation of growth. There isn't a lot happening here. Everyone's business is public business. And they had struck a gold mine and predicament with her. But they would put out a statement on this saying, "Please bear in mind that our choices are limited. We can print things about the witch and end up feeling used, or we can suppress them and end up feeling negligent. We may err sometimes, but I hope we will continue to err on the side of giving you information instead of withholding it from you. That's our job." The Reverend Douglas C. Butts, the head of the Brookwood Baptist Church, which Joanne was a member of throughout all of this, would send her a certified letter signed by the congregation that simply read, "We don't want you to come back to our church. Just stay away." In response to this letter, Joanne was made a saint by the Universal Life Church. As a reaction to being kicked out of her congregation, she founded her own church, the Supreme Angelic Grey Shadows Spiritualist Church. They met at a secret location known as the Dark Inn, once per week, and held Christian-based seances. But the evidence around this church is, like all things associated with Joanne, mysterious and unusual. I have found confirmation that the Dark Inn is, or at least was at one point, a real physical place. I even have evidence to believe that it was located at 204 Patterson Street in Morganton. I'm not entirely sure of that, but this building shown here very well may indeed have been it. But in all instances of the spiritualist church being mentioned in writing, the figure of it having exactly 30 members is always found. Always exactly 30 members. But not a single one of these 30 members is ever identified by name, except for Joanne. I have asked around and have found nothing. She would say that almost none of them were actually from Morganton, but would travel to attend their meetings. And this ties into a legal battle that at this point had been going on for years, that I have yet to mention. In 1977, she started to sue the Burke County government to have her Grey Shadows house be protected under religious property law, to have herself be exempt from paying property taxes. Something which she had successfully argued and been granted, both with the federal government and North Carolina state government. The case eventually went all the way to the Raleigh court, and on this Joanne was quoted as saying, "Somebody's going to have to come up with answers. After they find that I should be tax exempt, I'm going to get up on top of the courthouse steps and sing, 'I did it my way,' at the top of my lungs. James Blackman, the Burke County tax supervisor, is trying to give me a hard time. I'll get him. I'm going to take care of him my way." In September of 1981, Joanne would announce that she would run to become the next mayor of Morganton. The current mayor, Andrew J. Kistler, had first been elected in 1973, and had been re-elected every single term since then unopposed. "Morganton needs to be cleaned up, and I have the intelligence and power to do it," she would say. Her primary platform, as announced that day, would be to deal with the vagrants in the streets, and groups of teenagers who hung out downtown on the square because there was nothing else for them to do in town. She also wanted to target old family money that she felt was being hidden and protected from paying taxes. She would say, "That's going to be stopped. The laws are going to be enforced. She also had a policy that she promised to enact that people thought was particularly strange, where all of the men within city limits would be required to wear shirts or upper body coverings at all times. I believe in completely equal rights for men and women, and if women can't go topless, we shouldn't have topless men running around either. Her campaign manager, Stephen O'Grady, told the press that it's got the whole town in an uproar. In other words, she's rocking the boat. In private, though, it was said that she was worried about the outcome, suggested that for publicity, they should put her in the coffin again and parade it around town in a trailer pulled by a truck, and also hoped that the townspeople would forget before voting day things like her posing for nude pictures while holding a human skull, because she was worried that that would lose her the Southern Baptist vote. When asked on this, she said, "I don't think they would hold it against me because you know everyone has skeletons in their closet. Everybody does. They just don't want to talk about it in public. But you know my life is an open book." Mayor Kistler was supposedly extremely upset over Joanne making what he perceived as a mockery of his office, for what he perceived as attention. When the paper reached out to him to make a statement on this, he told them, "It makes me so damn mad I'd like to kill her." But that's beside the point. This is a democracy, and anyone who qualifies by residence, payment of the necessary filing fee, and constitutional age requirements may file to run for any office. The media has made a large thing of this. The citizens are still concerned with the basic issues. I feel like I have contributed to the growth and the enhancement of the quality of life in the city of Morganton. I am running on my record as mayor. I'm very proud of the office, have worked hard at it, and would very much like to be re-elected. The race was quickly divided into two minds of thought. Kistler as a representative of the establishment, of a track record of running a mostly stable government, a wealthy retired insurance man and well-respected individual in the local business community, but also representative of a failing Morganton economy. Many of the shop fronts on Main Street were boarded up and shut, and the number of honky-tonks in town had only grown since he took office. Versus Denton, a symbol of change, of a free anarchist anti-establishment spirit, based in grand spectacle, but one with little substance to back that up. Joanne's campaign reportedly made fake posters for the Kistler campaign that read, "Re-elect the mayor," that accompanied a cartoon of a very fat bullfrog. She also publicly announced that she had placed a hex on Kistler, and suggested that she may call upon the spirits to deal with the minds of the voters. A political cartoon is run in the paper of a voter about to cast their ballot for Kistler, before becoming overcome by the power of the spirit to vote for Denton. When on the campaign trail, Joanne gave her reasons for why she decided to run. "I looked into my crystal ball and my guardian spirit, Elvis Presley, told me to run for mayor. When my guardian tells me to do something, I do it. It gave me my basic campaign issues through mental telepathy. I didn't have to think about it. I have to go by my spirit in important decisions. A lot of people use Ouija boards or pendulums. Well, this guardian is my method. If I'm elected, the town council will have to accept the decisions of my guardian, as long as they're for the betterment of the town. My guardian is upset with taxes just like I am. Instead of using taxes for road improvement, let's get federal funds for paving and use school kids in the summer for labor. I think I'm qualified for office because I usually think things over, even though my spirit has to help." The decision to file was without thought, because my spirit said, "Do it. I know I'm going to win because Elvis told me so. I'm glad he's in my corner." She also confirms that the spirit of Elvis Presley has assured her that she will be victorious in her battle to fight to not pay property taxes. When asked how she felt about Kistler saying she made him so mad that he would like to kill her, she responded, "That's not something a mayor should say about an opponent. He thinks he will walk into another term, but he doesn't have Elvis Presley's spirit on his side." In the September 14, 1981 issue of the Salisbury Evening Post, writer Bill Jackson has this amazing line in his article on the mayor race. 3 years ago, the Morganton witch staged her own funeral. This is nothing new with politicians. President Nixon did that several years back when he said, "I think it will add to the decor of the White House if we install a few nice tape recorders." In the October 2nd debate that was held several days before the election, it is clear that Joanne came out looking poorly and unprepared. There is no video of the event, but based on a transcript that I found, Kistler came ready to fight. Every question on actual issues he would give very detailed and well thought out, lengthy, exact answers as to his position. And Joanne in turn would only give very short one-sentence, vague non-answers that indicated that she did not fully understand the topics that were being discussed. Her longest response in the entire debate was only 42 words long.
She recently put her name in the pot as an independent candidate for mayor of this little mountain town, and it stirred up quite a controversy. And maybe that's because Joanne is using sorcery and seances as campaign tactics. It's the day before elections, and we decided to follow Joanne on her last campaign blitz.
Of course, you know I'm running for mayor of Morganton, and I'd like for you to cast your vote for me, because I've got some good issues. And I would like for you to cast your vote for me, because you know I've got a lot of good issues.
Now, you might think that a witch running for mayor would shake up a little town like Morganton, but the citizens here don't seem to be spellbound by any of this. What do you think of a witch running for mayor?
Somewhat ridiculous.
It's very unusual.
Do you know Joann Denton?
To see her in the grocery store, and that is enough.
When the final votes were counted, Kistler received 2,053 and Denton 216. When asked how she did not perceive this outcome, Joanne had the following to say. "We had a seance earlier this evening and conjured Elvis Presley. He got very upset, and at that point I knew something was wrong. I never said that I had predicted the mayor's race, even back then. Elvis was too upset to make a prediction." This is not true though, as on September 19th of that year, she had told the Hickory Daily Record that she indeed had made predictions on the outcome of the race, and that her campaign manager, Stephen O'Grady, had absorbed some of her magical powers and had a vivid dream about them winning the race, and she would say, "I put the predictions in an envelope, had it sealed and notarized, and gave it to a friend. What became of this envelope and her predictions it seems to have been lost to time. One article says that the envelope was supposed to be opened on election night and read aloud to those in attendance. But I can't find evidence that this happened after she ended up losing so badly." Kistler would say after his victory was announced, "She had her crystal ball and I had the voters. It was tough though, running against a woman, a witch, and Elvis Presley all at the same time." That night, Joanne told the press, "I plan to challenge the voting system. Of course, it will take a couple of days to get that straightened out. There will be some things checked into." She would end up losing all attempts to force a recount of the vote. 10 days after losing her mayoral race, she would also have her tax-exempt case struck down in court. In response to this, Joanne had a very public performance that the entire town was invited to, in which she placed a curse on the members of local and state government officials and lawyers by hanging figures of them from a dogwood tree in her front yard. "I've just finished my effigy of the judge. I have to run him through a smoke of incense. But you don't need a clipping of the person's hair. Only a piece of parchment paper with the victim's name in red. I've had federal and state tax-exempt status since 1977, but the county won't give in. I mean, they said I had an artificial religion, but spiritualism is the oldest religion." One reporter expressed concern that Joanne seemed to publicly be threatening the safety and lives of government officials with this curse, to which she said, "I'm going to take care of him my way. Let it be a threat. I'll get him. I'll get by with it. They can't prove a thing. I didn't touch him, right? Print it." In the months afterwards, Joanne claimed that the hexes that she had placed on 2 of the lawyers working for the state had been successful. She would say, "One of those lawyers is now dead, and the other one broke his leg and has a 19-year-old son in a coma who will never be well." When pressed on these claims to have killed people with magic, she said, "It's like a dark shadow coming over me. I don't feel well, and I do things without realizing I'm doing them. I try to keep away from people then." That December, the paper reached out to Joanne to see if she had any New Year's resolutions, to which she said, "Resolve that if the urge to enter public service ever strikes me again, I'll run for the county line rather than mayor." In April of 1986, Joann Denton announced that she was leaving Morganton for Nashville, Tennessee, to pursue love and to start a new career as a country music star. She states that she had fallen deeply in love and intended to marry James Durham, Elvis Presley's former personal tour bus driver. She says that her guardian spirit brought them together. Before they went on to Nashville, Joanne threw a country music benefit concert and going away party to raise money for Jeremy Steins, a 7-month-old local boy who had cancer. In the time before deciding to leave town, Joanne's drive for media attention became more sad and desperate. Somehow it made national news when Joanne's friend, Johnny King, took a blurry picture of his dog and saw Joanne's face in it. She would tell reporters, "It was me, right there in the photo." At this, she then pointed to each of the flopping ears of the dog. "These are demon heads, one above my head and one below. See the whiskers on the demon?" Now, I do believe that it is extremely important to believe women when they say that something bad has happened or is happening to them. But soon after this incident, Joanne begins to claim that she is being stalked by a warlock. A warlock who she never describes physically, who always escapes on a moped before anyone can ever do anything about him. Before this, I can find no record of her ever mentioning this warlock publicly. This thing with the warlock has been going on for 2 years. Now I'm getting letters, and last week he left a note on my door. The final straw for her was when she claimed to have come home and found him stretched out, waiting for her reclining in the front of her house. He was stretched out on my steps. He was burning candles, and when me and my 2 friends walked in the front door, he followed us into the house. He followed me like a shadow and wouldn't say nothing. Weird. I told him I was going to call the police if he didn't get out of my house, and he left. When he left his candles burning. They were white candles, so whatever he was doing, it was good. White candles are for purity, so I guess it was trying to purify my soul. This thing is starting to sound like a John Hinckley case. It's dangerous, it really is. I've got all his letters. I'm keeping them in case something happens. I never find mention of this warlock in the newspaper again, so I guess that sorted itself out. She also makes a public statement claiming that Elvis never actually died, and that she communicates telepathically with the still living Elvis, who is somewhere in hiding. Oh, he's fine, but he's not real happy, because he wasn't the one buried in his coffin. The real Elvis is on an island, but I can't tell where yet. She also claims that a Hollywood movie starring her is about to go into production, but besides her word, I can't find strong evidence of this being the truth. At the time, she told reporters, "All I can say right now is it's a major production to be filmed in the North Carolina mountains, and it will have some very prominent people in it. I'll be playing a very mean and cruel person, but that's all I can say right now." It seems also that she began to feel more than ever that the people of Morganton had grown tired of the act. Gray Shadows was regularly egged. Beer bottles were smashed against her home and car, and in the parking lot of a local grocery store one day, someone poured an entire container of barbecue sauce all over her vehicle while she was shopping inside. When asked about it, she would say, "It's just jealousy, because I do what I want, and I'm happy being who I am. But when you're talked about, you're thought about. And when you're thought about, you're important. Otherwise, people wouldn't think about you, and gossip keeps the world going around." But it seems that Nashville was not the escape and rise to national fame that she had hoped it would be. No album was produced in her time there. And to recapture some of her public notoriety, and to remind people of who she was, she commissions a direct-to-VHS special about herself and the strange events of her life titled The Witch of Gray Shadows. An advertisement for this video reads, "Does the name Joann Denton ring a bell?" She gained a lot of publicity a few years ago when she staged her own funeral at her Morganton home, Gray Shadows. She even ran for mayor of the town once. 2 years ago, Joann Denton became a mere apparition, which faded to black when she left town and headed to Nashville, where she sought fame as a country music singer. But now she's back. Strangely, there is no mention of the death of Dorothy Ramsey. The topics covered on the back of the box are listed as unidentified flying objects and descriptions of sightings around Hickory, the curse of the pharaohs, did the mummies carry AIDS, haunted houses and messing with ghosts, how to call dead relatives to visit, what's the scariest thing you've ever seen, a hallucination in the toilet wearing cowboy boots, Elvis ain't dead, poltergeist arson, do they leave gasoline cans behind, Joanne's real Indian skull complete with curse, assaulted by a floating knife, how witches or anybody can fly on brooms, herbs and medicine, plus 2 musical performances by Durham and Denton. One of those 2 musical performances is Joanne riding completely nude on an all-white horse that's wearing a fake unicorn horn, while she sings the country ballad When Twilight Falls. While she was not able to conjure a country music career in Nashville, her presence did garner some attention, and filled some newspaper space in Tennessee when she arrived. She claims to the local press that soon after moving in, her husband James found an ancient grave in their basement inscripted with the name Brenner. In interviews, he seems to be growing frustrated by Joanne's need for attention and the media circus that she constantly surrounds herself with. When asked about the grave, he said, "We kept the cross, but I put the tombstone out with the garbage. I didn't want that thing in my house. I go outside when things start flopping around and the furniture starts moving by itself. She can have that stuff." They both joke a few times together in interviews, mentioning that his new wife has a surprising temper. She tells the paper that James disturbing the grave released the spirit of Brenner into the home. She would say, "He's a little man with a derby hat. He watched me put books on the shelf. I told him to go in peace, and to leave the lumber alone. It hasn't moved since." She also makes headlines by claiming that the infamous Bell Witch legend of Robertson County, Tennessee, which served as the inspiration for the Blair Witch Project, was in fact not a witch at all, but instead likely a poltergeist, or an unknown person with strong telekinetic powers. Locals did not appreciate her saying this. When she arrived in Nashville, one reporter in the paper introduced her to the area by saying, "Denton claims to hold the distinction of being the only person since the Salem witch trials, 300 years ago, to be tried under witchcraft law. The event occurred 10 years ago, following the death of another Morganton woman on the day that Denton had predicted at a seance less than a month earlier. While the charges were eventually dropped, Denton still relishes the distinction it gives her." When asked at the time if she really is a witch and did witchy things, she said, "Well, sure. I have a broom and ride it often. This is the 1980s, however. I need a new, modern broom with an electric motor. Even witches change with the new technology." I am not entirely sure exactly when this happened, but sometime before the summer of 1990, she relocates back to Morganton and tries one last large publicity stunt in her career, as a press conference is called on July 9th of that year, where she announces that she will raise the spirit of the hanged 15-year-old Frankie Silvers from the dead. Joann Denton press conferences were by this point a very regular, well-known occurrence, but this one in particular was wild even by her standards. A stage had been set up with speakers and microphones. The coffin from her funeral was set up draped in black as a backdrop. A man then came onto the stage and took the microphone and announced her as she arrived at the scene in a rented limousine. A whole host of goth, witchy people got out of the car with her and stood behind her on the stage as she spoke, but she did not explain who they were or what their role in all of this was. The event was to be held at the end of the week on Friday the 13th, because it was near the date of Silver's execution, which had taken place on July 2nd, 1833. And also because it was a day where the spirits walked the earth. This was to be held in the woods at night, at the site of Frankie Silver's grave, and the entire town was invited to come watch and help resurrect the teenager that their ancestors executed. Everyone was requested to wear all black, out of respect for the dead. TV cameras were expected to be there to broadcast the event. A human being could have lost her life for a crime she did not commit. I had a vision that she did not kill her husband, that other people were involved. She said this vision was not clear, and that a further seance was needed to invoke the meaning that Silvers was trying to convey to her. It was like looking through a misted mirror, not like seeing a human being in front of you. I could see Frankie standing there, just a child in a long dress. She was weeping, and I could see, as if I were looking through water, a horrible scene of somebody chopping up a body. It appeared to be 2 men doing it. We hoped to find out if she actually killed her husband. She was afraid to talk then, She was only 15 years old. Her spirit will talk with us. In the lead up to this, a local reverend, Kathy Benfield, criticizes the News Herald, saying that she is tired of reading in the paper about the private life of Joann Denton, and that they shouldn't be covering her satanic acts as often as they have for the past decade and a half. To this, Joanne claims that she has a Doctor of Divinity education, which gives her common sense enough to know the difference between Satanism and spiritualism. And I'm not trying to say here that she doesn't have a doctorate's degree. She very well might. But this is literally the only time I have ever seen her bring that up in any context. And I find it a bit odd that she wouldn't rely on that more often as a defense for being sacrilegious if it were true. And it also begs the question of why was she working as a medical technician if she had a doctorate's degree? Although we are talking about the 70s and 80s here, as well as Southern Baptists, who historically have not been friendly to women holding power or positions within the church. But still. In a show of power before the event, to those who questioned her abilities, she accurately predicted that her husband, James, would be in a severe car wreck. She would say she made the prediction to him 3 weeks previously, and sure enough, he's flat on his back today in a Georgia hospital. Including the representatives from the press, only about 75 people actually came to the event to witness the rising of silvers. A disappointing turnout compared to the previous events that could draw hundreds. But this might not exclusively be a sign of people losing interest in her antics, as I have read that it rained that evening, which I imagine kept some people away. Also, the Silver's grave is in a country location and is not located near town. Apparently, moments before the seance was to begin, the ground became extremely foggy, which scared some in attendance. At 8 p.m. exactly, Joanne began the ceremony by reading from the Book of Samuel, chapter 28, where Saul conjures the spirit of Samuel, and then the crowd was led in singing Amazing Grace. Then Denton began to chant, come Spirit, come. Speak to us, Frankie. We are trying to find out whether you killed your husband. Did you actually kill your husband? Tell us. Frankie Silvers, speak to us. Spirit of Frankie Silvers, speak to us. Did you kill your husband? Yes or no? At this point, a young woman, age 19, fell to her knees and bowed before Joanne and began to shake. Speak to us, Frankie. Frankie Silvers, did you kill your husband? The young woman began to shake more vigorously. She denies, yelled Denton. Do you know who killed your husband? Who killed your husband? Did your father kill your husband? Answer yes or no. Did any of your people kill your husband? Yes or no? Joanne placed her hand on the woman's head and started to yell. Was it your uncle? Did your uncle kill your husband? Was anybody involved besides your uncle? The woman began under questioning to shake but did not verbally respond to any of the questions directed at her. Joanne eventually said, do you want to be placed back to rest? Was anybody involved besides your uncle? Say yes or no. Was he killed with an axe? To this, there was no answer. We're going to put her back to rest now. May your spirit rest in peace. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. To say the least, the crowd was not impressed. They immediately started to make their way to their cars in the dark and the rain. And Joanne yelled to those who would listen, Frankie did not kill her husband, but she said her uncle was involved. She didn't know too much about it. I'm happy with the results because it answered my questions. The young woman from the crowd who did not give her identity, that was used to channel Frankie's spirit, would say when asked about what she experienced that night. First, my legs got weak, and after that, it took a while, and I started shaking, and then it stopped. And then I started shaking really hard, and I had to start breathing deeper than I was before. My hands started shaking back and forth and growing numb. When she started asking about her uncle, my hands started going back and forth, and I thought that was a yes. I think that was a yes motion. My hands were numb up to my elbows. My feet were numb. I couldn't move very well afterwards.
Was he killed with an axe? Yes or no? Was he killed with an axe? Yes or no? Yes or no? to rest now. Frankie, we're going to put your spirit back to rest, and may your spirit rest in peace. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Everybody say amen. 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 Should be all right. You all right now? This girl did not know the story of Frankie.
The next week, the paper runs an opinion column arguing that Joanne may not have any powers, but she is at least funny and keeps things in town from being too boring. Many express distaste for Denton starting her event with a reading from the Bible. This would end up being the last public display for Morganton's witch that would gain any large amount of attention to speak of, although there would be many more attempts. The next year, she announced that she would be bringing back Nostradamus from the dead, who she describes as a kindred spirit. I think our minds go along together even though I get my predictions through dreams and visions, and he got his predictions through astrology. She also predicts that a tornado will hit Morganton within a week, and that the local power plant will explode, which does not happen. Although in the spirit of objectivity, the local plant, Synthron, did actually explode in 2006, killing one man and injuring more than a dozen others. Even though there were 200 in attendance to witness her attempts with Nostradamus, held in the backyard and patio section of Judge's Riverside restaurant, this event had a different tone. There were audible laughs from the crowd aimed at her, and several people made mocking comments throughout the event. She has by this point begun to wear a black wig, instead of showing her natural gray hair, which people make fun of in the paper. She would give a hurt statement to the News Herald soon after. A lot of people don't understand me and my gift. I want people to know that there are a lot of things out there we don't understand. On June 30th, 1993, shortly before I was born, and shortly before her 60th birthday, Joanne announces that she would soon be retiring as Morganton's resident witch, a position she has held in notoriety for 17 years. Although she would continue to operate in some function despite this, I think that type of personality can never truly back away from media attention once it has it. Nobody really wants to enter their Baby Jane phase. In her characteristically somewhat bizarre press announcement, she would say, "I set a goal and it took me 60 years to get it done. There comes a time in everyone's life when you have to retire. It's time to get out of Morganton and go on to bigger things. I'll be leaving as soon as the house is sold. I'm going to be 60 years old. People say, 'You don't look that old. You must be well preserved.' I tell them I stay young looking because I live a good, clean life. I eat healthy and drink lots of water. I tell them, what you see is what you get. Everything's real on me, except my blonde hair. Lightning ran in on my house last week, and I was in a car wreck over the weekend. Maybe somebody's telling me not to go. I will miss it, but you've got to forget about the past and keep going." There are, of course, other things she did that would occasionally make headlines over the following years. She didn't just stop existing, but news about the marvelous Joann Denton and her powers slowed and eventually became almost non-existent. She correctly predicted that Bill Clinton would be elected president. She ran several charity events and public concerts for her music and others. She had a brief stint as a bit cameo actress. She would film scenes in the Disney-produced film Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken, as well as 29th Street and The Last of the Mohicans. She appears as an emergency room patient in the USA television network film My Stepson, My Love. She would be featured in commercials for Sprite and Weirdly the Winter Olympics. She had a brief legal battle with the city because she ran out of money and started to charge for her seances and predictions. One person bought a good luck charm from her and took it to the police to prove that she was making a profit telling fortunes, and through that, breaking the Witchcraft Act. But she would win this battle by invoking Federal Code 7605-C, which states that it is illegal for the government to question the internal workings of any church or religious organizations. In 1995, her husband James would publicly announce that he was resigning from working with Joanne on any further business ventures. At some point they separate and divorce, but I can't find record of when exactly that occurred. In the mid-90s, Morganton Town Coordinator, Sharon Jablonski, rescinded Joanne's annual invitation from the city to host the town's Halloween parade, saying her, as well as other members of City Hall and the local Merchants Association, did not feel she was an appropriate figurehead to have out there with children. The council also voted to remove Dracula as another figure present in the parade. This apparently was not done because they found Dracula to be particularly offensive, but instead to make it seem less discriminatory against Joanne personally. In the week up to the Halloween parade, several letters are published in the paper defending Denton, saying that Jablonski should offer a public apology to her, that legal action of some sort should be taken. One person says she hoped that it rained, and that the parade would, as a result, be cancelled, because of their disappointment with the local witch not being allowed to participate. Joanne's lawyer and representative at the time, Gary Tiggs, put out a statement that read in part, "I think it's inappropriate and embarrassing to advertise that she's going to lead the parade and then not have her in the parade." Jablonski would later say to the reporters, "I'm in a catch-22 situation. I don't think either way I go is going to be right. If Denton and her entourage show up on their own, I'm not going to say they can't participate." When asked for her opinion on it, Joanne said, "So many parents are going to bring the children to see me. They're going to be disappointed completely. Last year, children ran around and wanted to pose for pictures with me. I told them I was going to lead this year's parade, and they were all excited. It didn't hurt me. It's just irritating to think people are so narrow-minded." From what I can tell, there ended up being no further conflict that year over the parade. But in a strange twist of fate, it did in fact rain and the event ended up being cancelled. 3 years later, Denton would sue Jablonski for slander, specifically for the comment that she believed Joanne shouldn't be around children. Denton would say, "Saying I'm not fit to be around children. That leaves it open for people to think I'm a rapist, a child abuser, or anything. I'm a good role model. I worked for the state for 14 years. I don't drink, smoke, or do drugs. I may have posed nude for a men's magazine, but what's wrong with that?" During this time, she would be in the midst of 12 active lawsuits against multiple different parties. At one point, she says that she's willing to take Sharon Jablonski all the way to the Supreme Court over the Halloween parade. The next year, it was announced that Denton and the city of Morganton had reached a settlement out of court, where they would offer apology and one-time payment of $2,250. Jablonski's press release would read in part, "It was not the intent of the Main Street program to hurt any individual, and if any individual was hurt by the manner in which it was handled, it is sincerely regretted." Any statements during that time regarding Joann Denton's fitness as a role model was not intended to be a reflection upon her character. In response to this, Joanne said that she would be taking their money, but would not accept the apology, saying, "In my opinion, they lied because they deliberately attacked my reputation, and they are trying to deny it. They attacked my reputation and no amount of money can help that. In my opinion, officials in Morganton don't know what the word libel means." Several years later, in a particularly trashy event, Denton claimed to the newspaper that she was visited by the ghost of John Benet Ramsey. She said, "Looking around the room, suddenly, John Benet appeared near my bed dressed in full white, with her dress touching the floor. But I didn't see her feet. She was pale, but those piercing blue eyes glared at me, unsmiling. 'What do you want, John Benet?' I asked aloud, looking at her spirit. I attempted to touch her, but she vanished before my eyes." She claims that John Benet came to her 3 times that night, and each time she brought with her the name of one of her killers, but she does not say who these killers are. She would continue every year to open her home to anyone who wanted to contact the spirits on Halloween night. But over time, she would slowly retreat from the public eye and live a life of solitary retirement. Now, would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Joann Denton, and I live at Great Shadows, and I've been known as the Witch of Morganton. And I won Witches Contest at Western Carolina Center years ago, so everybody called me the Witch. So I carried that name ever since.
How do you feel about Morganton today?
How do I feel about Morgan today?
Morganton, yeah.
Well, people's been nice to me, except some has told lies.
Yeah.
If you remember seeing in the News Herald, one of the former attorneys said I wasn't fit to be around children, which was a lie.
Yes. That was with the parade.
I've worked with retarded people for years and never had any problem. And I don't know why he said that. But I think I put in a news her one time. I could tell a lot about these officials of Morganton. I said, don't worry though, my lips are sealed. I'll tell you like it is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Can you tell me about the warlock? The warlock. You said there at one point there was a warlock who came into the house. Can you tell me about that?
A warlock?
Yes.
I got to tell you about the warlock.
Yes.
When I worked at the Western Carolina Center, I won the witch contest. You had to go beg money, $1 a vote. And honey, I got out and I worked. I said I got to win that witches contest. People gave me money, $1 a vote. I think I had over 100. And there's a black guy won the warlock contest. People call me the Morganton Witch, which I'm not a mean person, but that's to make me mad. I'll show you how mean I can be. And then I think some of the churches didn't like it because I won a witch contest. And that's the reason I was thrown out. But there was nothing wrong with joining a witch contest. Well, anyway, there's a church from down Arkwood way. They had a big sign up, witches die in hell. I just won a witch contest, but they was going to send me to hell because of it. Then there's a preacher out of South Carolina. He wanted to have a witch hunt. Well, they know where I'm at. All they got to do is come over here.
Elvis Presley.
Oh, Elvis.
Yes.
Oh, we conjure up his spirit.
Yes.
Okay. Now, see, I was in music in Nashville. He did not, in my opinion, I'll tell you why. He did not die the day people said he did. He had a lot of lawsuits in him. A lot of lawsuits. And I told this, when I was in music, this movie producer, I won't call his name, I walked up to him and I called his name, I said, did you know Elvis is not dead? Nobody's going to believe it. Strange thing to me, whenever they announced, because Priscilla, in my opinion, Priscilla knew all this. It was pre-planned, premeditated. I think, and I'll tell you why. I believe the guy from California took a picture of his house. He was looking out the window. He was supposed to be dead.
When did he die?
He didn't, as far as I know.
Ever?
He would be 70, I guess, now.
Yeah.
In other words, I'll put it this way, Elvis didn't die. I've got the picture of him in his coffin with his false eyelashes.
Yeah.
Now, he may be dead now. I don't know. But I think if you'd go to his grave and dig it up, you wouldn't find anything there. It's who you are up there.
Yeah.
It's who you know.
Can you tell me about
I know all that's in music is who you know and who you are. That's the reason I got put in the country music parade. Mm-hmm. Okay, they usually charge people $200 for that. It cost me nothing.
Yeah.
I was in that coffin box, and it shut. And I forgot about 4 people carried it in. See, this is going to be a surprise. Well, they couldn't get it through the door. Here I was, moving around in that coffin when I got sick. Well, finally, they got it through the door. And when we got in there, they opened it, and I jumped out of it and got on this stage and sang. I've lived a good life. I have. But when I bought this old house one time, I called it the Dark Inn or something.
Where was that at? The Dark Inn. Where was that at?
I had the apartment I had got. I'll tell you about that too.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about when the seance was made. I did TV work and a lot of times, and I was in the first Halloween parade up there too. The first Halloween parade. I dressed up in my old garb.
Can you tell me about, in 1976, when you were in court, can you tell me about that?
Oh, let me tell you that.
Yes.
I'm going to start telling you the beginning.
Okay, perfect.
Fred Ramsey, of course he's gone now. That's when I had my big apartment house. That's when it got burned. He said, I want a table talking. And he and his wife were separated. I had never seen her. So about 4 people, I think it's about 4 people there, and I think they were related to her. And it was an empty apartment. And oh, I love this stuff. I drug my table up there. That's when I had my gremlin back then. I drug my table up. There's not this size. And we sat that down in that little apartment, and the moon was shining. And we read the Bible whenever Samuel conjured up the Spirit. You remember that? 1 Samuel the 26th. Well, you know all that. Read the Bible and sang Amazing Grace. I love Amazing Grace. I talked to the Spirit. I said, for the Spirit here, come forward. The table started shaking. You got to be at one. You got to. And I said, I see a vision. What do you see? I described the wife being black-headed and all. He looked at me. Oh, my God, that's my wife. I said, she's going to die April the 10th. Well, she did. Oh, the family got together and had me arrested. But I didn't go to court because I didn't do anything. But we had to have a hearing anyway. You know how things are. Well, I was standing there, and this lady said, Joanne, who's that beside of you? There's nobody beside of me. She said there was an image beside of you. Said wherever you moved, it moved. Well, I thought that's just an angel. But after all this happened, and, you take people that don't understand things. And then the family had me arrested, said I killed that woman. Charles and I was in the Biltmore State that day. She died of an overdose in the hospital. Somebody in that family had to tell her that she was going to die that day. And then Dottie Ramsey, this is true, every time she sees me, oh, I'd have had a grandmother for Mother's Day, but you killed her. No, I didn't. But she didn't know that Kathy, the girl that had me arrested, later her own daughter killed her. That was in the newspaper.
Really?
Is that a coincidence?
That happened.
Killed her. Sure did. The lady that had me arrested, her own daughter killed her.
Wow.
It was her mama. The News Herald printed it. Now that's strange. And we were, this friend and I was eating at one of the restaurants, and I didn't know that daughter worked there. She come over, well, you killed my grandmother. I said, well, I guess I got accused of killing Kathy too when her own daughter killed her. Yes, I said it. Well, I could have sued the attorney wanted to. They have nothing. They're poor people and not bound to be disrespectful. You don't get flood out of a attorney. Oh, I could have sued. Why? They have nothing. But later found out daughter got sick and had to quit work. Comes back to you, darn it.
Yeah. Do you think that it is possible at all that Fred Ramsey was involved with the death of Dorothy Ramsey in any way?
I don't know, but somebody told his wife it wasn't me because I didn't know her.
Yeah.
And Dottie Ramsey knows that I wasn't with her mama when she died. Unless they're trying to cover up for a member of the family. That's what I thought. Now, I'm not saying they were. It's my opinion that somebody's trying to cover up for a member of the family and accusing me. Because Lord knows I did not know that woman. And one of the boys came out and said, Joanne, Mama died. I said, well, I'm sorry, I didn't know. But then I got arrested. Yeah, the policeman come down here with the paper to arrest me. But a lot of times I've done lectures in Tennessee on the, abstain stuff. Like, people don't believe like ghosts and stuff like that. I do, and sometimes that I've done different lectures in different places. And never charged any money because I love it. And that's when people find out what I can do and invite me to haunted houses. But I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'm going to put you up to it.
Yeah.
I did a seance at the, what was that place up there it wasn't Biltmore State. Another place up there. I can't remember where it was. And F. Scott Fitzgerald stayed
at the Grove
there.
Park Inn?
Stayed there.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we used the same room and the same furniture. See, I did not know that till I found out later.
Yeah.
Well, a bunch of us went up there, and we got the spirit. We sure did. And I've got that stack of papers that I've been featured in. See, I was featured. I showed you. That shows a picture in England. Did I show you that?
Mm-hmm. I've seen it. I've seen it before.
Yeah. Anyway, we got the spirit up, And I want to go to the Biltmore Estate because that's where I saw that thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave it up to you to find out.
I'll get on it.
But tell them there'll be no drinking, nothing like that.
Yeah.
But I'm leaving it up to you.
Okay.
But it's got to be overnight.
Yeah. At
And
one
if
point,
there's something there, I will find it.
did Mark Allen Basham throw the flower at you? I've heard that several times before.
That one now.
I've heard several times before that Mark Basham came here and threw a flower at you. Did that happen?
Oh, that was down at the next to Rose's. There used to be a drugstore down there.
Okay.
Well, there's a pink carnation to put on her grave. And I handed it to her. She threw it back at me. Well, I went to the police department. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, her boyfriend or her one came up there and threw one at me up there. Didn't faze me. And the police was standing there. Of course, the police protect me. I know that. I've got people on the police force. I love them all. I said, if anybody ever hurts y'all, let me know. I'll take it. I did say it. Oh, I've done a lot of things. Yeah. But I'm sneaky about it. Yeah.
I bet you are.
I know how it's done. Just leave it to the old witch. That's what you call me anyway. I'm an act one.
What would you want somebody to learn from your life story?
Well, I tell you, I'm a good person till people bothers me. But when you have things to speak to you, now God has spoken to me many times. And one time I wouldn't listen. Listen to your conscience. I had a little dog, and God spoke to me. He said that dog's going to get up and get run over. Didn't pay any attention to that. Well, I did it because she got run over. And if I go to a store and I have this strange feeling, I don't go inside. Whenever you couldn't even hardly get toilet paper. Well, this lady had paper packed in her buggy or whatever you call it. Well, this other lady looked around. She, I guess, was so that she started grabbing that paper. Well, they had to call the manager. If that'd been me, honey, I'd have flattened her in that floor.
Yeah.
I would have. I might have been put in jail. I went to one place one time, and I'm the type of person, I sense things. And I went in this place, I looked around, I thought, there's something going on here. I left and didn't go back.
Have you ever used magic to hurt people?
I'll plead the fifth.
Okay. That's fair. Just had to ask.
I'll plead the fifth.
Yeah.
I present here in this video only the facts as reported that range from 1976 until roughly 2001. I have tried to remain objective in the way that this has been presented, and I hope I was successful in that goal. Say what you will about Joanne, feel as you like, but for me, I think that, not unlike myself and everyone else who moves away from Morganton, she is a product of this place and what it does to people. She was something that was allowed to exist because of the conditions that were previously instated. Joann Denton does not exist within a vacuum. She is a reflection of the environment that created her, as we all are. Remove the people from Morganton and is it still Morganton? I would argue not. Countless towns, cities, and countries have been abandoned and forgotten, only to be renamed when new people came to those places. And for good or for bad, again, feel of her as you wish. Make your own conclusions from the facts that I have presented you. But I think everyone could agree that through her actions, Joanne stood as an opposition to what this place means. She was the embodied manifestation of countercultural beliefs that are a contrast to the rigid, unmoving, and hypocritical standards of her time that have largely remained unchanged. She once said, "I don't run easily. You need to realize this is the Bible Belt, and anybody who is different or unique is from another world. You have to dance to their music, and I don't dance to their music. I dance to my own. All entertainers are not sinners, and are not going to the deepest depths of hell. Some of you grown adults behave like small children, have a one-track mind, and seemingly live in your own little world, not knowing that there is a real world around us. You live in a prison you cannot escape, but to your own choosing. Many Christians put on a big front on Sunday, shake hands with you ministers, and place a false smile on their lips, but deep within their beating heart there lies a dark shadow.
I'm calling you in early morn, come hear the witch's love song. I see your face, I hear your voice, and you've been gone so long. Your death took away your life, your face covered with black, but nothing can take away our love, my candles bring it back. Ooh, all those lovely things we shared, I cannot let them go. I love you in death, my dear, just see my candles glow. Your death took away your life, your face covered with black, but nothing can take away our love, my candles bring it back. Ooh, so now in the early morn our bodies come together. You hold my face and I hold yours, we'll love this way forever. Your death took away your life, your face covered with black, but nothing can take away our love, my candles bring it back. Ooh, my candles bring it back. All those lovely things we shared, I cannot let them go. I love you in death, my dear, just see my candles glow. Your death took away your life, your face covered with black, but nothing can take away our love, my candles bring it back. Ooh, so now in the early morn our bodies come together. You hold my face and I hold yours, we love this way forever. Your death took away your life, your face covered with black, but nothing can take away our love, my candles bring it back. Ooh.